So for all the stateful kind of use cases, we have the service orchestration. This is again based on Yang models. And what I'm going to walk you through is a few of the examples here. So let's start with the first one, which is the IETF L3VPN. Okay, so as you can see, I'm on the services section here, and I do have a set of examples to show you. So this is the L3VPN, an IETF-based L3VPN rather. So in this particular case, as you can see, we have two lists here. One is for the VPN services and one for the sites. So with the service Yang models, I think, of course, what you get is the atomic transactions, right? So once we go ahead and create the services, what we do is we make sure that either the service is completely provisioned or it is not provisioned at all. Or then we can also have a we create that consistent behavior. We make sure that when there are parallel transactions, they're all independent of each other, and also make sure that the network state or the device state is maintained. So unlike the workflows, this is more of stateful in nature. And here you can see in this particular case, we have two lists here. One is a VPN service. This typically takes care of all your VRF scenarios. And then you have a site, which is more of the different sites where your PE routers are going to be situated. So let me just show you what you would do here, right? There's an abstract user form that you would utilize. So here you can go ahead and start creating your VPN service. We can choose the different fields here. We can go ahead and populate all that information. So this is completely abstracted. The user really does not have to know what is there underneath. It could be a Juniper device, it could be a Cisco device or any other vendor device. All he needs to go and basically fill in this information. And when through our service models, we can also make sure that this is very tightly controlled. So every field here, we can go ahead and customize it in a way saying that, okay, for this particular field here, you need to have a constraint saying that, okay, the value should be between X and Y, or maybe we want to have a drop down to make sure that the user only chooses that. So we can have that very tight control when you're actually building that service model itself, so that the user has that has his limits wherever he cannot just go ahead and choose anything to go ahead and create that particular use case. So as you can see, we can go ahead and fill up this particular information here. The device IP, for example, here, this is coming, a drop down is coming here because in the model, you have to mention that a device, this has to point to the device inventory with an atom. That's why it's coming here. And then if there are scenarios where, let's say, you want to go ahead and make sure that there's an IP that you have to enter as part of that particular service, then what you would do is you want to integrate with an IPAM. So that's something that you can do as part of the model. And as and when we go ahead and choose the particular IPAM module or particular IPAM module, we'll make sure that when the service is created, we reserve that IP block and then have that IP, whatever IP is we're getting from the IPAM is going to be used as part of that service. Or, in this particular scenario, let's say you want to go ahead and create an RD value. So we have an IPAM module within Atom. It's a lightweight IPAM, which has the RD and the RT manager also. So we can make sure that this particular model, you can go ahead and just mention what is the RD and the RT profile, and based on that, we'll generate the next available RDS or the RTS, and then you can go ahead and assign that. So you can build in all those dependencies within the model itself, so that there is when the user is finally trying to execute this, all the different the complexities are taken care within the model itself. And this is an IETF model. And in this particular scenario, this is we are looking at a Juniper. This is provision this on a Juniper device, and in here you're going to fill in this information. And I'm just going to show you, once we go ahead and apply that, what is the kind of CLIs or the netconf payload that was generated. So I'm just going to check one of the logs here. All right, so this is the VPN service that I'm looking for. Okay, so you can see the logs and then finally the commands. So here there are two PE devices that I'm trying to configure, and you can see there's a routing instance. This is the netconf payload for one particular device, one of the PE devices. You can see the RD values and the RT values and the VRF details here. This is all the Juniper native Yang. So you can see how we have the Yang.Juniper, right? We can mention the device model here. All right. And similarly, if it's a multi-vendor model that we have, then of course, let's say one side is Juniper and one side is Cisco, we would generate the corresponding commands. And let's say the Cisco one is a CLI-based device, then we'll generate the corresponding CLIs for that. So that way, the user is never exposed to that complexity at all. And then there is the sites where he can go ahead and choose the what are the different sites and where the PE is situated. So you can go ahead and feed in this device list here. So this is more of a resource model where we really don't have to go ahead and generate any command. The service does not really generate any command, but this is kind of useful for you to be utilizing it as part of the workflow or the automation itself. So you can go ahead and fill in all your PA devices on this particular location. Then you can go ahead and choose the site bearer, for example, here, right? This is where you're going to give what exactly the port that is going to be connected to the CE device. And then this is the site network access where you can go ahead and look at the exact and how you're combining this VRF configuration that you created here and the port details, right? And also inside this, you can see this is an L3VPN, so you're going to see some of the other details like the routing protocols involved. Then what is the encapsulation towards the CE, right? And also the routing protocols, as I mentioned. So once you go ahead and apply this, again, we're going to generate the corresponding commands for that. So I'm going to just search for that as well. So this is the specific log, and you can see this is the netconf payload that we generated for this particular section. All right. So in case one of these devices do not respond, then of course we are going to go ahead and roll back the entire service so that we make sure that there's no stray configurations left on the devices. Similarly, we have support for the same IETF-based L2 and L3 VPNs, but again here it's an OpenConfig based model. So here what we are looking at is more of an L2 VPN. It looks very similar to what I showed you earlier. The structure is going to be very much similar, but what you can look at here is the how we go ahead and trigger the device model. So as I mentioned earlier, it could be a native YANG model that we trigger, or it could be an OpenConfig model, or it could be a CLI model, right? So in this particular scenario, it's an OpenConfig model. So here, let me just go ahead and choose this. Okay, so this is the model here. Let me go to the commands, and as you can see here, the device model is OpenConfig based, and we have generated the corresponding commands here. All right. So this is the corresponding the L3VPN model for the same OpenConfig model. And then there could be a scenario where you want to have a set of pre-checks and post-checks to be done, right? So generally, we know with the YANG model, you can maintain the device and the network state, but there's no flow associated with it, right? So typically in an operator scenario, you're going to have, again, a set of pre-checks that you would do, and then you have the services that you would create, and then you have the post-checks. But then to bring them together, this is where one of the unique value propositions of Atom comes in, where you can combine the workflows and the services. So in this particular scenario, in this particular use case that we have here, we are actually trying to create an E-line service. And the user, he can just go ahead and add this particular service from here. He can go ahead and choose what is the A side, what is the Z side, etc. What are the details. So all of that can be populated here. So once he goes ahead and creates this particular service, the service is going to trigger a workflow inside Atom. So this is the workflow that gets triggered. And here what happens is you can see we'll validate those inputs. From there, it is going to figure out, okay, what is the A side, what's the Z side. We're going to do some connectivity checks for each of them. And then we're going to do some of those prerequisites and the pre-checks, as I mentioned. So the structure is going to be very same, but just that the tasks are different in every MOP. So here you can see we'll go ahead and do those pre-checks, and then we have to go ahead and generate a set of payload for that. So this is where we're going to again go back and go back to the service, come back to the service. We'll trigger the device models, and then we push that configuration, and then we create that service. So we have to maintain the state. So we come back to the service, create that, maintain the state, and then we come back again to the workflows to perform the pre-checks and the post-checks. So here is the section we're doing a pre-check and the post-check. This is all embedded into the single workflow here. So all of that can be triggered from the network. So the main point here is that how we are trying to combine up the workflows and the services together into a single use case to basically satisfy the operational model of a customer. And in this particular scenario, we also have cases where we have to go ahead and trigger a Jira ticket at most of the places, because they want to make sure that there is the ticket is updated at the beginning of the activity, and as we progress, there's an update that happens at every period, every point in time. So they wanted more control, so we have all of that handled within the workflow itself. Now, where do they get these details of the Jira and the other the other third-party integrations here, right? So that is where we have something called as a server details here. Now, server details is more, like as I mentioned, like a resource model. It really does not go ahead and generate any commands, but what it does is, this is the area where you can go ahead and fill up all these details, and it's more like a one-time exercise, so that can be utilized during a particular creation of a use case. So here you can see that there is a section for Jira where you go ahead and give all the details of your third-party integrations that you would require as part of the workflow. And during the workflow, we're going to utilize this and then execute whatever is required as part of the workflow.